The Word of God comes to us here in the liturgy, spoken to us as we are today in the reality of our world. These documents may have been written more than 2,000 years ago, but they speak to us today about what we are experiencing today. And so let me repeat once again what Sharon read to us earlier from the prophet. How long, O Lord, I cry for help, but you do not listen. I cry out to you violence, but you do not intervene. And a little later on, destruction and violence are before me. There is strife and clamorous discord. If you read the daily paper, which I hope you do rather than getting 10-second clips from television, you know that the violence that the prophet speaks about here is everywhere in our world today. The world of violence which we experience on our city streets, where people kill one another, but in the terrible wars that are going on all over the world. We read about them, we hear about them, but it's difficult for them to make much of an impression upon us. We are momentarily horrified at the things that we see and hear, like the little child dead, washed up on a beach in Turkey, or another child sitting in his own blood and dust. And then we forget about them. But we have to keep reminding ourselves of them, as the Bible keeps reminding us that it is the Word addressed to us here and now, today. I just want to mention a few of those violent episodes that are so prevalent, for us to once again think about them and to hear what God is saying to us about those things that are happening to us. The prophet says to God, I cry out to you and you do not hear, in the midst of all this violence. Now there are two things involved there. First of all, it's the report of the violence itself. And secondly, the question that has been asked time and time again through the ages by good, believing people. God, how can you allow this horror to happen? Think of some of the things that have happened in the country of Syria. You know, we should be very much concerned about what happens in that country. Syria was one of the most important places where Christianity began. We know even from the Acts of the Apostles, the city of Damascus was the place where the followers of Jesus were first called Christians. Syria was an outpost in the ancient world between Rome in the west and the kingdoms of the Far East, China and India. Syria was in the middle. That's why we call it the Middle East. It was between those vast expanses of territory. And there was a great culture, a great civilization there. Many documents of Christianity were written in the Syriac language. Saint Ephrem is one of the great saints of the Syrian church, Christian church, our church. And there we have seen the horror visited upon the people there, whether they are Christians or not. History has made a lot of difference in the course of the ages. But the horrible things visited upon those people. In a recent account, 2 hospitals were bombed. Hospitals. And along with that, a bakery where they made bread. Bread, the staff of life. The hospitals trying to provide life and foster it for the sick were bombed. And a bakery where people needed to buy bread to live. The human life involved there is the most terrible thing of all. But also, ancient monuments have been destroyed in Syria. Now, people are much more important than monuments, of course. But monuments speak to us about our history, about who we are as a people. Suppose planes came in and bombed the Capitol and the Washington Monument. and the newly opened African American Museum. We would be horrified because those monuments talk to us about who we are, our identity as a people. That's been happening in that country. The horror of violence is something that we must not forget. We must keep track of in our minds and hearts and understand what the prophet is saying, crying out to God in need. We may well say with the prophet, sometimes it happens to us ourselves. Terrible things can happen, accidents, illness, death. And we're inclined to say, why, God? Your goodness, your mercy, your power, why do you let these things happen? The prophet gives us only a hint. He says, look for the vision of what might happen. Look for these things to be healed. But that doesn't help in the immediate circumstances of terror and pain. And the only answer is that God does not intervene in human life to undo the evil that we do. God is the author of life, of creation, of all that is good. We, human beings, are the authors of death and destruction. Only we can undo the terrible things that we do. Now, we as a small community or as individuals cannot do that except by exercising our conscience in the way we live our civil life, the way we vote, the positions that we take on economic and social issues. We have to do what we can in our small way. But we do something very, very big when we come together in this celebration of the Holy Eucharist. Because this celebration is an act of dissent, of defiance, of revolt against the violence in the world around us. We come together in peace. Before we come to communion, we greet one another with a sign of peace. Jesus comes into this world as the Prince of Peace. And at the beginning of the Christmas liturgy, we celebrate him as the King who makes peace, Rex Pacificus in the old Latin liturgy. The King who makes peace. He doesn't just talk about it, he brings it about through himself, through his work, through his sacrifice of himself. He is our peace. And when we come together like this to celebrate the Eucharist, what we do is to say that we are part and parcel of that action of peace of Christ in the world. Our celebration here is not something on the fringes or on the edge of our faith. It is central to our understanding of ourselves as members of his body, as those who continue his work in the world. And we pray together today that we may be able to do that, each of us in our small way, but all of us together in a sign of unity and mutual support, that we, like Christ, may be the makers of peace in our world. And we ask that he may help us to do that in reality.